Pierre Luc Dubois speaks on his time in LA. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show, and we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September the 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The countdown to the NHL season continues. The LA Kings season opener is October 10th at Buffalo, 31 days away. Its preseason opener is this month, September 23rd, 14 days away. And the rookie faceoff in El Segundo, just 4 days away, coming up this Friday. Hockey season is fast approaching. Coming up, we're going to talk about any drama involving the LA Kings heading into training camp and touch on any position battles that are looking to be won. But we start with someone that we're probably pretty happy with that we're not talking about being drama heading into Kings training camp. And that, of course, is the departed Pierre Luc Dubois. As we kind of close the door on PLD, at least until he returns to Los Angeles to play the Kings, or the Kings are in DC to play him, and then he'll be brought up again. But until then, I think this is probably the last time we're going to be talking about it. But the former LA King did an interview with a French language media outlet in Canada recently and talked about his time in Los Angeles and why it didn't work out with the Kings. He was asked about his one and done season in LA and told La Presse, quote, "I kind of had a feeling after my end of the season meeting with management the night before, they hadn't talked to me about trading me, but I had a feeling they were going to try," end quote. On why it didn't work out in LA, Dubois said, quote, "Take it for what you will, but I've always needed to have clear instructions to do my job 100%. I get mixed up when there are gray areas. I question myself too much. I've been working on these things since I was young, and there, from my first conversations with the team, I didn't really know what was expected of me. I didn't know where I stood. You can't play well when you're questioning yourself too much," end quote. On his relationship with former Kings head coach Todd McClellan, Pierre Luc Dubois said, quote, "We didn't talk often. Todd is more of a team tactics coach. Maybe I didn't have that relationship, but I was too demanding, wanting to have that path explained to me. It's obviously my fault that it didn't work. I tried to take on the challenge, but I stayed in a gray area all year. I didn't feel at home. The players helped, and I wanted to unblock, but it just wasn't working," end quote. On looking back at his 1 year in LA, Dubois said, quote, "I thought I was going to settle down here for 8 years, not get traded after one. Professionally, it's the worst case scenario. You want to succeed in your career. You want to please your team, the people around you," end quote. Well, nothing too, incendiary about his comments. I've said all along, when Pierre Luc Dubois talks to the media, he seems pretty honest, pretty open, and pretty genuine. And I don't really have a big issue with anything that he had to say about why it didn't work in LA. I do agree the Kings really didn't seem to have a defined role for exactly how they wanted to use him. And I think his comments pretty much confirmed that. And frankly, I think that's on coaching and management. I don't understand, when you look at the Kings' perspective on this, how you can trade for a player who has had past issues and you invest what you invested in him, and you don't have a clear, defined role for him. It was like there was some kind of disconnect between Rob Blake, the GM, and Todd McClellan, the head coach, and as a result, a disconnect with the player, Pierre Luc Dubois. It was like T-Mac didn't want him, but was told to make it work anyway, and he just didn't have a desire to do that. Clearly, the Kings share some of the blame of why it didn't work out with Pierre Luc Dubois. That said, Pierre Luc Dubois is hardly blameless in all of this. Now, is PLD a bit of a diva? Is he high maintenance? I think you'd have to say yes. Now, he's 26 years old and he's been in the league 7 seasons. He talks, though, like he's still a kid trying to figure things out. And I know he kind of took some of the blame on himself in saying that he has some issues that he's working with. But again, he's a veteran. He's not a kid anymore. And he has to take responsibility. I think he is, but some of what he says just doesn't hold water. But from the Kings standpoint, I think they also have to take some of the blame because they need to know what makes a player tick. And the head coach, if he doesn't know going into it, has to figure that out quickly. And as dumb as it might sound to feel like you have to hold the hand of a 26-year-old man making over $8 million per season, if that's what you have to do to make it work, then that's what you have to do. And it just didn't seem like the Kings were willing to do that at all. I don't know how you, again, can invest in this player and go through it the way the Kings did. Now, look, Pierre Luc Dubois has been in the league long enough that teams should know what he does and doesn't do well, and they should have a good idea on how to utilize what he can do and how to handle it. And the Kings didn't seem to know how to do that or didn't figure out how to do that. And again, that is partially on management for signing a player that they didn't have a clear defined role for, and it's on Todd McClellan for not being able to figure things out, to put him in the best situation possible to get the most out of him. Now, Jim Hiller seems to be more capable of handling something like that, of adjusting. And Pierre Luc Dubois even made comments that when Jim Hiller took over, he thought the situation got better, but he also said that he thought that the organization had kind of made up their mind on him and that he wasn't a fit and they were looking to get out of the relationship. Now, again, Pierre Luc Dubois, to his credit, did take some responsibility for it not working out, but he also can't talk about his role and things not being defined because that may explain part of it, but it also doesn't explain at times when he half-assed it on the ice. That, like, it doesn't matter what your role is, it doesn't matter what line you're playing on, it doesn't matter who you're playing with. Your effort should never be questioned, and especially for a player who an organization made a huge financial commitment to him, but it was. And frankly, that speaks to his character, or at least flaws in him as a professional. And I think he seems to be saying he recognizes that and he's working on that. But again, he's not a kid anymore. He's a veteran. He's now on his 4th team, and he should have figured it out by now. The most basic thing you can do, especially for someone who's getting paid a lot of money, is to give the most effort you can, night in and night out. And clearly there were times where he didn't do that. Now, Pierre Luc Dubois is not the Kings' problem anymore. And like I said, this will probably be the last time we talk about him until the Kings play the Capitals, and we'll bring it up again. But clearly he's going to a situation in Washington, and I am curious to see if it works out for them. They have to go into this with their eyes completely wide open as to what kind of player he is and how you have to handle him at this point. And if they're able to make it work, then I think we'll have to look back and say, why were the Kings unable to make it work? All right, up next, we're going to talk about any Kings drama and any potential training camp battles that we've got coming up. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 weeks free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube TV plan, you're able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market NFL game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And of course, FanDuel is always there for you to bet on your favorite sports. Major League Baseball, college football, and of course, the NFL is underway. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, with the season coming up quickly, I've seen some other Locked On shows talking about the drama with their team heading into training camp and training camp battles, and it's an understandable topic. And it got me wondering, do the Kings have any drama going into training camp? Well, And also, do they have any training camp battles that we should be watching? But when I think of drama, I think mostly that comes from contracts. Is there a big player who's going to be an unrestricted free agent going into the season, and the Kings might have to make a decision on at some point during the season, just like the Kings had with Matt Roy last season? And we know that didn't turn out great for the Kings. He ended up walking at the end of the year, and the Kings got nothing in return for him, and they were out in the first round of the playoffs. This season, the Kings have a handful of UFAs going into this season. Probably the most notable is defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov. You've also got David Riddick and Phoenix Copley, Tanner Jeannot, Trevor Lewis, and Andreas Englund. Not exactly a bunch of high-profile star players. I could see the Kings looking to re-sign David Riddick or Phoenix Copley to one-year deals as they have the last few years. If Tanner Jeannot works out in LA, I think they could look to re-sign him. Likely wouldn't be a big contract, though. So Gavrikov is the most intriguing player because he could be this year's Matt Roy situation. Now, if the Kings are not in a playoff race, then the decision on Vladislav Gavrikov is very easy. You trade him at the deadline and you get assets for him. But if the Kings are in a playoff hunt like they were last year, and like I think they will be, then what do you do with Vladislav Gavrikov? You saw what happened with Matt Roy. Now, they could keep Gavrikov, and maybe he's looking to re-sign with the Kings. Clearly, Matt Roy was going to test the market. It was the first time he'd really had a chance to do that, and this was his big chance to cash in. Is that the same situation with Vladislav Gavrikov? Not necessarily. I mean, if he really likes it in LA and the Kings really want to bring him back, they could work something out before the end of the season. But if they can't, if he says he's going to test free agency, then they're risking another scenario like Matt Roy, where he could leave after the season for nothing. And hopefully the Kings have learned their lesson when handling a player like that. So we'll see how that works out. As far as any real drama goes, I think the Kings do have one issue as far as the resolution with Arthur Kaliyev. That's the only drama I think the Kings have right now. And he's the only unsigned player on the team still to this point. We know he wants out. Apparently nobody wants him for what the Kings are looking in return. And he and the Kings are going to have to maybe give it one more try. The Kings certainly have all the power here. If Kaliyev is going to play in the NHL next season and the Kings want to keep him, then he's going to be an LA King. But the question is, do the Kings want to keep him? We don't know at this point, and likely aren't going to be getting many details on what's going on with this anytime soon. Have they offered him a contract? Has he refused to sign it? Have they talked to other teams about him? Again, are we going to get details on this? Probably not. But at some point, with training camp coming up, they need to get him into camp if he's going to, in fact, play for the Kings this season. As for training camp battles, I would say nothing really significant, in my opinion. There are some things that are of interest, I guess you would say. Certainly Darcy Kemper, as far as being the number one goalie. Look, he's going to get every opportunity to be the number one goalie. The Kings don't want to be paying their backup goalie, who's signed for the next 3 seasons, over $5 million. We know how that worked out with Cal Peterson. Not well. So is this something of interest? Yes, but I wouldn't call it drama. Like I said, Darcy Kemper is going to get every chance to be the number one goalie, and I think he'll play well enough to be able to hold on to that role. Is there a battle for who the Kings' number 2 center is going to be? I think the Kings would like Quentin Byfield to be the number 2 center, and if he plays well in that spot during the preseason, then I think he'll start the season there. Of course, it was also expected going into last season that Pierre Luc Dubois was going to be the second-line center, and that never happened. If Byfield has a slow start in the move to center during training camp, during preseason, then I imagine maybe he could start the year as the number 3 center, with the hopes of him eventually moving up to the number 2 center at some point. As for Philip Deneau, I'm sure he would prefer to be the number 2 center and get the minutes that go along with that, but he's a total pro. He's a solid teammate, and whatever role he's in, he will accept, and he will do what he always does, and that's play hard and give it everything he's got every game. Now, is there a battle over who will replace Matt Roy on the second pairing defensively? We know it's going to be either Jordan Spence or Brandt Clarke. Now, Spence has the experience and the slightly, he has more seniority as an LA King, obviously, than Brandt Clarke does, but Clarke clearly is the next big star for the LA Kings as far as a defenseman, and the Kings have invested more in him, so it'll be interesting to see how that works out, how the two go into camp, and where it may or may not progress. Certainly looking to one of those two guys to be the quarterback of the second power play unit as well. Maybe they share time and see how it works out. So that's interesting to see that. I don't know that it's necessarily a battle per se, but that is something certainly to keep an eye on going into training camp and see how that works out. But still, I don't look at that as a battle necessarily for Q or Deneau, second, third center, and Spence and Clark, second or third pairing defenseman. It's not a huge question mark going into training camp, but it's something to keep an eye on. Now, maybe there will be a battle who takes Quentin Byfield's spot on the top line on the wing now that he's apparently moving back to center. Now, I think Alex Laferriere is the front runner for that, but maybe Alex Turcotte or Akil Thomas could get a shot playing the wing on that top line as well. Of the three, Laferriere is actually the youngest at 22. Turcotte's 23. Thomas is 24. But as far as NHL games played, Laferriere is the veteran here with 81 games last year. Turcotte's got 32 career games over 2 seasons, and Akil Thomas only 7 games in the NHL. If there is truly a player or players battling for a roster spot, it could be Arthur Kaliev, who we talked about already. Looking to get into the lineup consistently, which is a big reason why he was asking for a trade, because that wasn't the case last season. So if the Kings and Kaliev are going to give it another try, then there needs to be a clearly defined plan and role for him, which we've talked about. The Kings at times aren't great with that with certain players, but they need to let Kaliev know exactly where he stands, what's expected of him, give him the defined, clear role, tell him this is what you need to do to stay in the lineup, and then it's on him to do it or not. And I think Samuel Fagemo is another player similar to Kaliev as far as his style. He could be fighting for a roster spot. He could be fighting with Kaliev for a roster spot as well. Both players we know can score. Fagemo had a tremendous year in the AHL last year, but both players are also players that need to be set up to score. They need help from other teammates. So as far as drama, training camp battles, I think there are some things to watch. I think there's some things of interest. We talked about Darcy Kemper, who's going to be the number one goalie. I think it certainly is Kemper to start out. There's the second position at center. Will it be Byfield or will it be Deneau again? I think Deneau's going to get every chance to win that spot. Second and third pairing defenseman on the right side. Is it going to be Jordan Spence? Is it going to be Brant Clark? I don't think that's a big deal either way. I could see Spence starting out in that second spot and then Clark getting his feet wet in the NHL full-time being on the third pairing. And who's going to play wing on the top line with Kopitar and Kempe? Is it Laferriere? Is it Turcotte? Is it Akil Thomas? That will be certainly interesting to watch. And Kaliev and Fagemo getting their chance to try and win roster spots. We shall see. So that's what we're looking at, I think, for the LA Kings as far as any kind of drama or any kind of training camp battles as we go into training camp. Well, there is news on the Kings getting a new sponsor. We'll touch on that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Those of us that live in LA, so lucky that we got so many opportunities to see live events. Sports for sure. I was at the Chargers-Raiders game this past weekend. No, I did not get in any fights. But it's not just about sports. We've got theater events, concerts. I went to the Hollywood Bowl last weekend, had a great time. But no matter what you enjoy, what you need to do is use Gametime for all your ticket needs. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. They make getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You're a Dodgers fan? Well, Gametime has some great deals coming up for you as the postseason is approaching. Obviously, college football going on as well for USC and UCLA, NFL with the Chargers and the Rams. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDONNHL, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. There was a little bit of Kings news to pass along from over the weekend. To be totally honest with you, it's not something I'm excited about, but it is newsworthy. I don't make the news. I just report the news, as they say. It's probably something that I'm actually surprised we didn't see sooner, not just with the Kings, but across the NHL. And it's starting to creep into sports, unfortunately. And we're seeing a little bit more and more of it. I think the NHL has embraced it a little bit more because unlike baseball, unlike basketball, unlike football, obviously they're clearly in the fourth position as far as the major sports in North America, and that comes along with how much money they make as well. So anyway, last season, the Kings and a lot of other NHL teams added advertisements on their jerseys. A lot of NBA teams have done this as well. The NFL hasn't done it yet, and baseball just put the Nike swoosh on their jerseys for the first time, so they're kind of crawling into it as well. Although some of them, I think, have ads on their sleeves. Anyway, the Kings added also advertisements to the helmets the year before. So it is slowly starting to creep in more and more, and we're only going to see this more and more in sports going forward. Now, if you listen to this show with any regularity, you know I love hockey jerseys. I have a decent collection of hockey jerseys. I got a pretty good Kings collection, and I definitely had a rant about this when the Kings announced they were going to have an ad on their jerseys last season. And I said I would not buy any Kings jerseys, any new Kings jerseys, if it had an ad on it. And so far I haven't. Now it's going to get a little bit harder for me because the Kings do have the new style of jersey, the new logo coming out, and I probably want to get something like that. So we'll see. But last year it was Mercury Insurance on the Kings home jerseys on the chest area. This year, the Kings are also adding advertisement on the jersey for the away white jerseys as well. They announced in a press release that Iron Bow is their sponsor for the white road jerseys. Now, according to the release, Iron Bow, B-O-W, is the preferred IT solutions provider of AEG and the LA Kings. Now, they are the preferred provider because they are paying AEG and the Kings a substantial amount of money. Now, don't get me wrong. I get teams are always going to be looking for new revenue streams from putting a company's name on the arena or the stadium to moving ads on the boards, even animated ads to ads on helmets and jerseys. I get it. It doesn't mean I have to be a fan of it. So far, the ads on the helmets and the jerseys have been relatively small. And it should be pointed out that not all NHL teams are doing this, at least not yet. Of the 32 NHL teams, the Kings are one of 20 teams that will now have ads on both their home and away jerseys. They do not include, or should they do include some historic franchises like the Bruins and the Maple Leafs are doing this. They've got ads on their home and away jerseys. But there are 10 teams that actually have no ads on their jerseys so far. But that's likely going to change in the near future because there's no reason for them not to do it. Now, hopefully they don't go the path of international soccer. And I'm no international soccer expert, but I know it's like the English Premier League. They basically, you flip-flop what the Kings have now. The Kings have the big team logo on the crest, the chest, and then up in the upper corner of the chest, they have a little ad. Well, in soccer, they have that reversed. They have a little ad telling you what the logo of the team is, like Manchester United or something. And then the big logo in the front of the jersey is the advertiser. So I hope that never comes to pass with the North American sports where you have that situation where it's a big sponsor, although I think that might be the case in the WNBA. I know they have more advertising on their jerseys than the men's sports do. And if you've ever seen a European hockey jersey, it is an absolute joke. It is so full of ads. It's ridiculous. It's like the ads on a car in NASCAR. There are ads everywhere. There are ads in nets. There are ads on helmets all over the jersey and the pants. It's just, I mean, I guess they're used to it there, or maybe they have to do it to survive, but it is really hideous and not fun to watch to me. So whether I'm going to get another Kings jersey with an ad on it at some point, I don't know. I'm certainly trying my best to not do that because I'm kind of protesting that. But eventually, like I said, this is the wave of the future. The ads aren't going away anywhere. As a matter of fact, they'll only add or make them bigger as we go down the road. And now that there are ads on helmets and on jerseys, now we're going to get used to it. And then they'll push it a little bit more and push it a little bit more. And and we'll see where it goes. But not a fan of it. And if you're old school like me, I'm sure you're not much of a fan of it as well. Hey, for you everydayers, or for the remainder of this week, every other dayers, because we are going back next week to 5 shows a week. This Wednesday, looking to have a special guest to preview the upcoming rookie face-off, but that hasn't been officially scheduled, so I can't give you a name at this point, but hopefully we will have an interview on Wednesday talking about the rookie face-off, which starts on Friday here in Los Angeles. And also, of course, on Friday, we'll have our weekly fan feedback show. Do you think the Kings have any drama heading into training camp? What do you think about any position battles that you might be interested in? And any comments on what Pierre Luc Dubois had to say about his time in LA? If you want to get an email in for the feedback show, the address is feedback. Actually, that's the wrong show. That's the Puck Podcast. For this show, it's lockedoneddie@gmail.com. Lockedoneddie, EDDIE @gmail.com. If you want to send an email for Friday's show. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put your comments in the comment section. It helps the algorithm, helps the show to get recognized on YouTube, and we really appreciate that. We'd love for you to stay connected with the show on social media, Twitter, X, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Wednesday or Thursday. And as always, go Kings, go.